In the literal final hours of the Gulf War, one of the biggest tank battles since World War II just erupted out of nowhere in the Iraqi desert. And what went down at the Battle of Medina Ridge? It wasn't just a victory, it was a complete and total demolition. Today, we're going to find out why. So how do you destroy 186 enemy tanks and only lose 4 of yours? And listen, that's not some kind of hypothetical question. That's the real central mystery of this battle. And the answer tells us a whole lot about a pivotal moment in modern warfare. Let's dive in. So picture this. It's February 27th, 1991. We're talking just hours before the ceasefire that's going to end the Persian Gulf War. And on this, seemingly ordinary patch of high ground in Iraq, 2 incredibly powerful forces are on a collision course. All right, so to really get what's happening here, we got to zoom out a little and see the bigger picture. In the last days of the ground war, the American V-7 Corps was pulling off this massive left hook maneuver. The whole goal was to trap and just completely annihilate Saddam Hussein's most valuable military asset, their Republican Guard. So you've got 2 major players here. In one corner, the U.S. 1st Armored Division. We're talking the tip of the spear of American military power, armed with some of the most advanced tanks in the world. And in the other corner, Iraq's Medina Division, one of their most elite, battle-tested units, dug into the desert and just waiting. And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, think about this. The 1st Armored Division, all by itself, had about 3,000 vehicles, and nearly 350 of those were the incredibly tough M1A1 Abrams tank. This was basically a tidal wave of steel just rolling across the desert. But, the Iraqis weren't just sitting ducks out there in the open. Nope, they had a really clever, classic tactical plan. They were using the terrain itself to set a deadly trap, what's known as the reverse slope defense. So what exactly is a reverse slope defense? Well, it's actually simple but brilliant. Instead of putting your forces on the side of the hill that's facing the enemy, you hide them just behind the crest, on the other side. This is huge, because it protects you from long-range, direct fire. The enemy literally can't see you, so they can't shoot you. At least, not until they come right over the top. So try to imagine you're an American tanker rolling across the desert. What do you see? You see this 7-mile-long ridge that looks, well, empty. They knew the enemy had to be somewhere in the area, but the ridge itself looked quiet. Deceptively quiet. But now, flip that around. From the Iraqi point of view, this was a perfect kill zone. They had their T-72 tanks and all their other vehicles dug in, concealed, just waiting. The plan was to let the American Abrams tanks come over the top of the ridge, exposing their weaker belly armor, and then open up on them at close range. It was a perfectly laid trap. Okay, so the stage is set. The trap is laid. The American spearhead is rolling right towards that ridge. What happens next? Well, the ridge erupts in what some people call the single largest tank battle of the entire Gulf War. The whole thing just unfolded with breathtaking speed. First, scouts confirm the enemy positions. Then, the 1st Armored Division just pushes forward. As they crest that ridge, the Iraqis open up, but instead of hitting a vulnerability, the Iraqis were met with an absolute storm of coordinated American firepower. And the sheer efficiency of this attack, it was just staggering. Get this, a single American brigade, the 2nd Brigade, took out almost 100 Iraqi armored vehicles in less than an hour. The trap had backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. Now, you gotta understand, this was not just a straight-up tank duel. The Abrams tanks on the ground were absolutely devastating, yeah, but they were not alone. You had Apache helicopters and A-10 Warthog aircraft raining down fire from above, destroying dozens of Iraqi tanks. It was a perfectly synchronized assault from both the ground and the sky. So after just a couple of hours of this brutal fighting, the smoke starts to clear. And the results? They are just almost unbelievable. The final numbers tell a truly staggering story. I mean, just look at these numbers. They're insane. For every 1 Abrams tank the U.S. lost, the Iraqis lost more than 46. For every 1 U.S. armored personnel carrier that was destroyed, Iraq lost over 60. The difference across the board just points to one thing: a completely overwhelming and decisive American victory. At the end of the day, it really just boils down to this visual right here: 4 versus 186. So why? Why was it so lopsided? Well, a huge part of it was superior technology. The Abrams had thermal sights that let them see and target Iraqi tanks right through all the smoke and dust, plus their advanced armor could take direct hits. The American crews were also just better trained, which meant they could fire faster and more accurately. So even with a really well-laid trap, the Iraqis were just totally outmatched. But, and this is a really important point, this wasn't a complete cakewalk. The Iraqi forces fought back hard. They actually managed to shoot down an A-10 and 2 Apache helicopters, which is a real testament to their air defense and, honestly, their determination to resist the American advance. So what do we take away from all this? What's the lasting legacy of this brutal, incredibly one-sided battle? Why are we still talking about Medina Ridge today? Well, for one, Medina Ridge was just this huge validation of American military tech and doctrine. It proved the M1A1 Abrams was an absolute world-class tank, and it was a textbook example of the power of coordinating ground and air power. Ironically, it also proved that the theory behind the reverse slope defense was actually solid, even if it failed spectacularly this time against such a powerful and well-trained enemy. You know, beyond all the hardware and the tactics, there's this human element you can't forget. The American commander, Colonel Montgomery Meigs, he later paid respect to his opponents with a really simple but powerful statement. He just said, "These guys stayed and fought." It's a soldier's nod, acknowledging the courage of the Iraqi forces, even when they were facing impossible odds. And all of this leaves us with one final, really big question. At Medina Ridge, a clever tactic got crushed by superior technology. But is that always how it works? What does this battle really tell us about that constant tug of war between having a good plan and just having better weapons?